On February 27th, KLAX producer Arnold Woods and I went to the California Medical Facility at Vacaville, where Charles Manson is currently being incarcerated. We made the trip at the invitation of Manson, who contacted the station through an intermediary. When asked why he had chosen our station, Manson stated that he liked Berkeley, and so being a Berkeley station, he said he thought he'd offer us a chance at the interview. After being searched by guards at the main entrance to the prison, Woods and I were escorted to a point outside a heavy metal gate. There we waited for Manson to be escorted to the room on the other side of the gate where the interview was to be conducted. Manson arrived shortly and was locked inside the room. The gate was then opened, and we two were led to the interview room.
Thank you very much. Just see when the people over there are ready to go.
Sure, that'll be fine. Thank you.
Hello?
Kennedy? Kennedy, right. Nice to meet you. This is my family, Arnold Woods. How are you doing? The door was locked behind us, and we proceeded to set up our equipment for the interview. Music being the intended topic of discussion, I began the questioning by asking Manson about his friendship with Alvin Karpis, the last surviving member of the Ma Barker gang, who had taught him how to play the guitar.
Karpis showed me some, guitar players change rubs all the time. They show each other different things that they play. He just showed me some of the things that he played. But his style of music was not my style of music, but even though I incorporated some of his repertoire into what I play. He was just a good old man that I met on the road. He had been done wrong also. He never did anything. J. Edgar Hoover just put him in jail because he was friends of people that did something, and he wouldn't snitch, and he wouldn't tell. In other words, he held his mud for 48 years.
How about yourself? Do you categorize yourself in the same way?
I don't categorize myself.
No.
Do you?
Do you think you've been done wrong?
Oh yeah, they're way off base. They said I was a hippie. I'm not a hippie. I was a beatnik before the hippies got started. I was a beatnik down in Venice pounding on bongos and reciting poetry in the 50s, 54, 55. And when I got out and I seen what they did with the beat generation, they ate the beat generation up, and they had the hippies on the block. And they was fixing to eat the hippies up, like they ate the beats up. That's where they made the mistake with me. They picked me up with the hippies and said I was a hippie. I wasn't a hippie. I was a beatnik. Before the hippies, you guys were kids. They were kids to me, I'd already went through that. I was Elvis Presley before he was.
I understand that you are now going to be producing an album with the punk rock band Black Flag.
If you look at everything backwards, Terry Melcher came to me. I didn't go to him. They came to me to play music. Dennis Wilson came to me in the mountains. I wasn't going down there trying to play music. The DA would say, hey man, you were trying for a record career. I had a record career. I didn't want a record career. I just got out of one prison. I didn't want to go into another. When you do music or you do anything for the public, you got to be a slave to that. You got to be there on time. You got to carry clocks and dollar bills and tax trips. You got all kinds of things to do. I was free in the mountains. I didn't want. What do I want a music career for? I got a music career. I don't need. I play music for music. I don't play music for attention. I don't play music to little girls. I'm not selling records. I don't play music like you guys play music. You're blocked up in little squares to play music. I don't play music like that.
Okay, so you aren't doing it for the public's interest, it's purely for your own enjoyment?
It's for my own enjoyment, and I found out that in California that in order to get justice, you must buy it. They will not give you what they call fair trials. If you have the rights that our fathers died for, I would have had my trial, and I would have had my rights in my day in court, but I didn't. All I got was, you guys blame me for the 60s. And then Jerry Rubin and A.B. Hoffman and Timothy Leary and Barbara Rondas and all the Holy Moroccos, they all ran the other way when it got too nasty. They would tell their children, raise up and kill your mom and dad, but then when they raised up and killed their mom and dad, then all the people that said that ran. And then they blamed it over on me and said, oh, well, Charlie Manson's a hippie cult leader, and he made up kids do all that. But none of them kids that got busted said that.
At one time, did you feel any, affinity for them?
Sure, I still love them, sure. They're still like mine. They're like me. They're like street people. It's like this, man. And back in the 40s, when I'd be on the basketball court, for example, and all the kids would say, "Hey, your mom's calling you, Billy." You know, so Billy would leave, and then John would leave, and Tom would leave, and I'd be out there sitting on the basketball smoking a joint. You know, and I was unaccepted. I was the outcast. So I ended up stealing a bicycle, and I went to reform school. And then I get out 10 years later, and I go back to the neighborhood, and I go back to the basketball court, and everybody's grown up, and there's a whole new wave of kids there. So we sit and we talk, and I say, "Whatever happened to Johnny?" "Well, he died in Korea." "Well, whatever happened to Joe?" "Well, he's an automobile engineer in Detroit." "And whatever happened to so-and-so?" "Well, he moved to Chicago." And then I steal a car, and I get a gun, and I go rob a few places. And then I come back out of prison after 10 years, and I go back over on the basketball court. And the time for Johnny to go home, Johnny doesn't go home. And the basketball court, there's 10 or 15 kids, and it's all the way after dark. And what are you kids doing out after dark? Well, ain't you going to go home for dinner?" "Oh, no, my mom kicked me out of the house. My mom's a drunk. She don't like me." In other words, the last time I got out in 67, the road that I was walking on, hey, there's a whole bunch of kids walking on the same road. I said, "Well, I didn't know you knew this place."
So, in other words, you feel you had your bed laid for you early on?
No, when I heard Timothy Leary say, "Tune in and drop out," I knew where they were dropping out to because I had been on the under road, on the back side of what's happening, you know. In other words, in the darkness.
Do you have a resentment for types of things that you did encounter when you were a child?
No, I don't waste my time with those silly little resentments and hate and all that bitterness and all that. Right.
Did it have an effect on you at one time?
Just to the point to where I found out what it does to you. In other words, I'm not going to destroy myself because someone else is suicidal. Someone else has got problems, that's their problems, not mine. I got my own road I walk.
So, in other words, you don't feel any remorse for your childhood, but you do feel it did affect you and your outcomes?
No, I'm glad. I was glad to be raised by myself. And I think it worked out better. Sometimes you're good. The best parents are the worst parents. And sometimes the worst parents are the best. Because the worst parents don't teach you anything and leaves you to learn for yourself.
But you do understand that from somebody else's perspective, they may have felt that they were, detrimental. Do you regret anything that occurred in your lifetime?
Not to this point, no.
Okay, well, let me get back to your music. As I mentioned earlier, you had said that you are cutting an album with the group.
No. I got a little tape recorder like this little Mickey Mouse thing here. And in fact, it's not as good as that. And I play a little music and I sing a little music. And what happened was I gave a couple tapes that I had made to a friend of mine about 4 years ago. And he said he wanted to do something with them. Well, I told him, go ahead and do whatever you do. So he got in touch with some kind of lawyer somewhere doing something. And then they got this thing going, and now they're talking about they're coming out with an album.
Oh, this is the Us magazine article?
Yeah, but it's not an album done in a studio. It's a Mickey Mouse little trip for... but knowing the way the news media has dealt with me, they'll take it and make it into as the best thing that I could do, but it's actually not really... It's not really a reflection of any music that I play. It's a reflection of me passing my time and practicing. You know, I guess you'd call it practicing. I'm not really practicing, I just like to play, you know.
You mentioned that, in 1967 you did break up a relationship with both Terry Melcher and Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys. Now, Terry Melcher was the person who had owned the home that Sharon Tate was murdered in earlier, and obviously there were some connections made between his previous ownership of the home and the eventual deaths of Sharon Tate and J.C. Bring and Abigail Folger and Wojtek Frykowski. Was there any connection between those events?
That's my neighborhood. I run that neighborhood. I run in that neighborhood. I live on the beach. I live in Venice, Santa Monica, in the mountains, and I went to that house 4 or 5 times with a friend of mine that's named Dean Morehouse. He's a religious type fella, deacon in the Methodist Church. And I've been to the house and parties. And Tex Watson knew the house because he was on the edge of what I was doing. He was watching the way I was doing what I was doing, putting together whatever I was putting together. So he picked that house. He just went to that house because he knew that house. But it didn't directly have anything to do with me.
So it was just coincidence that it happened to be previously owned by Terry Melcher?
Yeah, just total coincidence. Yeah.
Tell me about your relationship with Mr. Melcher and how you happened to strike
I like Terry. Terry's a nice, gentle person. He's a peaceful person. He doesn't lie. He's treated me right. I would consider him a friend, but I think all this madness scared him. I think it scared him to thinking that I'm somebody that I'm not, you know. A lot of people think that Manson is some great monster, but the only monster Manson is what the media created and the district attorney created. Do you guys realize what's going to happen to this country because of that case? When you can go to college, son, and learn to be a lawyer, and then you can go to a district attorney's position and do anything you want, that makes you the leader of this country. You can put anybody on trial and say anything you want to say and tell any lie you want to lie. Why spend billions of dollars for a school to study criminology when all they do is sit up on the witness stand and lie? You just lie, and then you don't need the schools, you know. And the whole thing was a big sham. It was a big act for the world, man, a big play that they put the children on trial for trying to stop the war. And then all the people like Joan Baez and what's that other chick's name?
Oh, you mean Jane Fonda?
Yeah, Jane Fonda and all those people. They'll scream and they'll holler for the kids to do something, and then when the kids do it, then they say the kids are all fucked up, you know. And the only ones that bring change since time began is the young people. The young people are the ones that have to suffer the sufferings to change the system. Well, we're still working to change the system. We're still improving the system and working within the system.
So are you saying that the murders of Sharon Tate and the LaBiancas was a political act?
My goodness, man. And did you see Jerry Rubin stand up in the TV camera with an M16 and say, raise up children, kill your moms and dads? You didn't see that? You don't remember that?
Sure.
Well, you didn't put him on trial. You got Charlie Manson and put Charlie Manson on trial. Did you hear A.B. Hoffman go through all the colleges and give all the speeches to all the young minds about how to shoot cocaine, how to deal with your dope, and how to play in that underworld? And then at the same time, he never spent 3 days in jail. He owns the judge. He buys and sells judges. And he rides on the top of you children. Then he'll go back and play like he's hiding. Let me explain something to you. To hide from the FBI in the United States of America is almost an impossibility. Slick Willie Sutton, one of the slickest crooks in the world, couldn't do it. You got Patty Hearst, and you got her acting like she's on the run from the law. She was never on the run from the law. She was in the FBI office all the time, you know. And then you got A.B. Hoffman that acts like, oh, well, we're with you kids. All right, you kids, you go do this, and then the kids run and do it, and then who gets the blame? You know, the kids get the blame. And then the kids go down and let me take you to Strawberry Field where nothing is real but the medication in the nut wards, and then they cut their wrists and write I love you God all over the walls and hang themselves on the ventilators, you know.
Yeah, you take deference with the use of drugs and drinking. Is that an established value of yours that you just don't like drinking and drugs, or was this at any time?
I smoke grass, and I've lived around drugs all my life, and I've lived around booze all my life. I'm not against anything. I'm against the misuse. You can misuse anything, man. You know, you can say the guy's hooked on marijuana, and to some people that's a reality, you know. And then they say one drug leads to another, and other people that's a reality. But the younger people don't see how those thoughts became a reality. Why are we fighting drugs? Why do we spend millions and millions of dollars fighting drugs when you can sell it in the drugstore and it wouldn't be a problem? I mean, it don't make any sense. You know, the whole thing is silly. It's not the drugs that are bad, And it's not the people that are bad. It's all the mess that you've got created around the misunderstanding of the drugs. There's nothing wrong with drugs. If you're sick in the hospital and they come and give you a shot to take away the pain, you appreciate the drugs. I think God put everything there for us to use. If we misuse it, that's our fault. And one way we're misusing it, we're fighting against a power that we're not going to overcome. We have to flow with the flow of those drugs.
Last September, you were severely burned by a fellow inmate who doused you in paint thinner and lit a match. He says you attacked his religious beliefs and threatened him. Was this just an isolated conflict between two inmates, or?
It was in his mind. I didn't have anything in my mind. I'm not thinking about anything. He's arguing with himself. The devil he's chasing is the one that he's living with. That's inside of him. His fears and his doubts he has to deal with. It hasn't got anything to do with me. Like he could have got more argument from the church house than he got from me. I have no religious convictions in any particular direction. I'm my own religion.
There's been much publicity surrounding the fact that you were allegedly known as Jesus Christ, and that the Manson family was the quote chosen few.
Yeah, this is part of your district attorney. He had to say all that to win a conviction. He had to hook me up as being a leader in something. I've never led anything in my life. I had a motorcycle, a sleeping bag, and a guitar, and that's it. And if anybody is on the same road I'm on, and they need a cigarette or a dollar bill or a ride or they're hitchhiking, I generally help them as much as I can. I never owned that ranch. I wasn't the central figure in anything except the music. I like to play music. I play music. People come around and listen. Okay. If they give me something to eat, okay. If they don't, okay, man. I'm not, I wasn't waving any flags. I wasn't out to do anything. I just got out of 22 years of prison, man. I just got out of prison. Can you imagine 22 years in prison? Can you imagine that?
It is hard to imagine.
Well, I just got out. How can I be responsible for the children of the 60s when I was locked up in the dungeon all during the 60s? And as far as me being Jesus, let me explain to this. This little before your time, there was a guy named Krishna Venta who claimed that he was the second coming of Jesus Christ. And he had a cult in Box Canyon in Los Angeles. He called it the Fountain of the World. And he was having a sex orgy one night with about 12 or 15 women. And in those days, back during the 40s, that wasn't very well accepted. So what happened was someone put dynamite up underneath his house and blew him up. They blew him up, blew his wife, all these children, blew everybody up. Blew about 15 or 20 people up. And there was bodies all. And I was a kid looking at this. So it just so happened that, we'll say 25 years later, I was standing on the same spot with 15 women. And there had been 15 women blew up. And we laughed and we got in a circle and we said, we were blew up here once. So that we won't have to blow the world up. Maybe we can make a little mark here where we won't need to blow the world up, and the next wave of kids can have their game to straighten out another end of it, like the air, the water, the trees, and the wildlife. See, there's certain order in life, and the order in life to each man would be himself first. And then after you got yourself in order, then you reach for your city, your town, your country, your world. So it's a guy was trying to put order into his life. And he would preach on the weekends, and he would hang on a cross, and he'd come down, and he had all these followers. All right. When I got out, I was running with a guy named Jesus, called himself Christopher Jesus. And the cops had a tentative list because we were burning up road equipment that was tearing up the land. They were destroying the water and destroying the animals in the deserts. So what I did was I used to go around and burn up all these things that were tearing up the earth. And I would sneak around and do devilish little things to slow their progress down, because when you see 200,000 or 300,000 animals dying because somebody wants to put a fence across the desert for no particular reason except making money and selling something to the public for a new road projection, all that madness that they play in. And I tear the fences down and tear the water and put the water back into the land where the animals can have a game to play. And Jesus was running with me, and we called him Zero. And then when the cops had this list, this tentative list of who's who and what's what, they come up to me and they said, "Are you Jesus?" Because Jesus was spelled like Jesus. And I said, "No, my name is Manson." They said, "Oh, yeah, you're him, son of man. Manson, yes, you're him." I said, "What?" So that when they booked me in the county jail, they thought it was real funny. They booked me as also known as Jesus Christ. I had never had any thought like that in my life. I never needed to think I was anyone. Why must I be somebody? I mean, everybody's got a name. I've had thousands of names. I don't need a name. What do I need a name for? I don't even name my dogs. My dogs are just dogs. I name my chickens, or it don't make sense. The whole thing. I'm from another world, man. You guys live in one kind of world. I live in a whole altogether different world. Because you got to consider, I was raised up in jail, not on the streets. And as far as the religious aspect, I was a student of Paharasa Yogananda in the 50s and the 40s. I've went through all the retreats, and I've seen the light. I know all the things that Mashi Mushi knows, or Hushi Basha, or whatever you want to call them.
What is prison life like for you? At one time you had said that prison had become home to you.
Yeah, prison is a thought. Prison is in the mind. Someone draws a line and says you're in prison. I'm going to put you in prison, and your number is 3359, and you're going to do rah, 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 rah. It's a struggle of will. It's a struggle of whose will is doing what. If their will is interposed over your will, then you're considered to be in prison. But as Ganji would tell you probably that the passive force overcomes all that. There's no prison, not to me. I'm just here, The people that are in prison are locked up in their minds. They get paid to go back and forwards and torment other people, and I just look at them, and it doesn't affect me, not personally.
So do you still consider prison home in that sense?
I'm home. Anywhere I'm at's home. If I'm in Chicago, I'm still here. Anywhere I go, I'm here. If I'm in New York, I'm still here. If I'm in Florida, I'm still here. No matter where I go, I'm here. So home to me is me. I'm my own home because I was raised by myself. But someone that was raised with a mother and father, they have the thoughts in their minds and the patterns in their minds of whatever home is to them.
Do you consider the idea of being released? Do you want to be released from prison?
Released? I just want to be left alone, and I'd like to have my own will back to where I could do what I want to do. I would be content and satisfied with the rights that my fathers died for. It's that simple. It was all written down in 1776. It was laid out just as beautiful as God had done it. And everybody wants to find a God somewhere, man, and we got people landing on the moon. My goodness. It's like one guy come up and said, my God quarried 3,200 stone and lifted it up over these mountains and set it perfectly in place. I said, oh, yeah, you got a big God. I said, now look up there at that 747. I said, now that's more than 3,200 tons, and it's not only set in perfect place, it's flying around the world. So, how far would you have to go before you see God? You see space shuttles, and you say God, and these guys are still down here worshiping something that some medieval torture chamber was doing, nailing people to boards and things and calling it God. I don't see that world. I dismissed that world a long time ago. Really, I have. I dismissed it. It's gone from my mind. I don't even, it comes over and says, you pay me some attention. I said, no. Well, you accept our God as being the God. I said, all right, I'll accept anything, Now can I get on with my business? They said, well, we want you to. I said, okay, man, you're all right. I accept everything you say. Everything's perfect. All right, you guys go your way. Can I leave now? And they said, no, we want to hold you. I said, why? Because we want to pick arguments with you and throw fire on you and drag you up and down the hallways and blame you for everything we don't understand and everything we don't know. I said, hey, look, I said, sit down and I'll explain it to you. How simple and childish it is. You all grew up. I didn't. You all grew up and I didn't. I watched you all grow up and I said, wow, far out. You get old and you lose your teeth and your hair falls out and you get fat, and you pay yourself to do all kinds of crazy little things. And I have no judgments against your world, only what is. But you guys have always, I was going to say you, I'm talking about the system, has always put its judgments over on me, trying to make me into something that you could relate to. But you can't relate to me, unless you're me.
So in other words, if you were released, you would be content to that fact? That
no, somebody's going to pay. Somebody's going to pay, one way or another. If the courtrooms are in order, I'm going to sue. I'm going to sue. I'm going to sue for everything California got. I'll own California by the time this is over. If I sue. Now, if I can't sue, that's okay too. Then I'll start a revolution.
Okay.
I won't say that I've already got one going, but look around you and maybe you'll see that it's like this. A guy comes up to you and he's called the district attorney. He's got all these guys and he handcuffs you and he sets you down. And he says, you're going to play this game whether you want to play it or not. So they start dealing out cards. And they deal you hippie cult leader. You don't know what a hippie cult leader is. There's never been a hippie cult leader. So you got to go find out what a hippie cult leader is. You know, you say, all right, I got a hippie cult leader card. I got 9 murder cards. I'm supposed to be responsible for making all these people do all these things. I'm supposed to have this awesome power to move people to destruction and have the power of the presidency that I can put troops in the field and have them go out and fight and die and take other people's lives for me. I'm a whole government by myself, convicted to be that. That's not me. But they convicted me for Nixon. They gave me all of Nixon's problems, all of Nixon's children. And then they say, I'm Nixon, they convict me and throw me into jail. And then every one of my friends that you call my family, were my friends, not my family, my friends. They didn't have any friends. The district attorney has no friends. His friends is his dollar bill and his wife that tells him what to do. Okay? So I've got friends. And he doesn't like me because I got friends. He hates me because I got friends. Because he wants to have friends, but he doesn't know how to have friends. He plays tennis with himself. You see him in college. You dig? And they study their books and they get real good and they're proficient in what they do, you know. But they're still distorted in their makeup because they haven't accepted that there are someone else in the world, you know, besides their own selfish interest.
So you disavow the designation of the Manson family. That's just something that was projected on what you call your friends?
I am the Manson family. My will, I say open my hand, it opens. I say close my hand, it closes. My will, my hands, my fingers, me. My heart, my soul, myself, me. I have earned that. It's like I told the judge. I know, God knows, and the Holy Spirit knows. And what you're selling down in the marketplace, your children are going to have to work that off. So I would suggest you not sell them a whole bunch of lies, you know, but they continued to sell that damn helter-skelter trip that had nothing to do with me. Helter-skelter, to me, was a nightclub in the desert. And I cut the card game a nickel. So I could buy dune buggy parts and go out and play in the desert.
Let me ask you what the connection is between the Helter Skelter, which was written on the La Bianca's refrigerator, and then there was had written your own song composition called Helter Skelter. Had you not?
Who told you that? No, I hadn't. No, I hadn't even thought of anything like that. Helter Skelter was painted on different things, man. It was a reflection of why don't we do it in the road? You know, that was you see, you guys got to realize, man, I'm 50 years old. Bing Crosby was my heartthrob. Frank Sinatra was my hero. Not the Beatles. In other words, Dean Martin lives right across the river from where I live in Wheeling, West Virginia. I'm from Kentucky. I'm a Kentucky boy. You know, in other words, like, it took me 20-some years to get to California. Some of you guys are born and raised in California because your parents came here, but man, I got no thought. You know, I'm not into the same things you guys are into. You know, not now and not during the '60s. In other words, my generation was the '30s. I was raised up during the Depression. You guys don't even know what it's like to be hungry. You know, there's a difference. You know, and the kids that were running in the street when I got out, I liked them. I really did. You know, if they were my kids, I'd be awful proud of them. Even though they did some dirty, terrible things, they still stopped the war. They did it, you know, and they probably saved a lot of their brothers' lives. But they're still in jail, and they have to take the blame for it. Or they're not accepted as political prisoners, you know, because some DA had to make up something. Or someone else tell a lie, say, well, you did it for money. Or he did it for, and there's all kinds of motives that they play with, but do you ever think he didn't do it? You know, you're always looking for the motive before you find out whether that he did it. And then another thing is, you go to court in this country, and it says they're not interested in why you did it, they're interested in if you did it. But why you did it should be an issue also. Why are the children doing what they're doing? Why does a child reach up and kill his mom and dad and murder his 2 little sisters and then cut his throat? You know, why would a child do something like that? Because we're not raising it upright. We're programming it poorly. Our TVs are murdering people every 15 minutes. You see 2 or 3 people dying on TV. And yet, to the generation of the 60s and 70s, well, the TV's raising the children. The TV's their mom and dads.
If you had had a different situation, would you have turned out differently, or do you think you...
No, then I wouldn't know what I know. I'm satisfied with what I know. Yeah. I've got my world. You know, I've got my world. There's very few people can say that. They're always, they must hold on to somebody or something else. I don't hold on to nobody or nothing. You know, I don't need anything. All I need is to be left alone.